Welcome to the Overcoming Adversity podcast, where it's all about a transformational growth and having a resilient mindset. I'm your host, Michael Allison. And before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Today, a guest of mine had a real gut punch when she learned that she had a genetic mutation that gave her 87% chance of breast cancer and 55% of ovarian cancer. In 3 months, she had a preventive double mastectomy, hysterectomy, while also caring for her mother who was dying of cancer. This lady has fared her own fair share of adversities, but she learned how to turn her creativity into art, and she also became an author. Let's welcome to the show my good friend, Miss Eva Moon.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Eva, thank you so much for joining me and being here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you.
I was listening to some of the things that you have done before, um, read through your bio, and I was saying this woman has been through some insurmountable amount of things in her life, adversities, and for her to come on here and share her story and share it with the world, I know that there are some other people in this world that could have been facing some of these same things or going through currently right now, and I just think it would just be absolutely inspiring for her to share her story of what she was going through, what she was dealing with, and how she had to get through that using all of these creative ideas that you came up with to get through this situation. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
So let's jump into it. Let's talk a little bit about you have a book that you put out, and
Yes, I do.
so let's talk a little bit about the book. Tell us what the book is about, and let's go down that road.
Yeah, well, actually, the book is sort of came out of all the processing of the experiences that I went through, even though it seems like it's completely unrelated. Pinocchio's Guide to the End of the World is a historical fantasy that follows the life of Pinocchio after he became human. And I think the thing that drew me to him as a character was that everyone assumes that once he got his wish, that once he became a real boy, that that was happily ever after. That was it. That was his wish had come true, and life would be wonderful. And I really questioned that. Because I don't think that we're necessarily great predictors of what's gonna make us happy or what's not gonna make us happy, in the future, in our future selves, because I
Hmm.
had some real surprises, after the things that I went through,
Hmm.
and I think that even though, Pinocchio's transformation was wished for and mine was not, uh I think that, became sort of a spokesperson for me of, the disconnect between sometimes you feel between your internal self and your external self, the face you present to the world and how you feel on the inside, and I wondered, after he became human, he had just been given this body, but
Hmm.
inside, didn't he still feel like the same person? Don't you feel like the same person even though your body has changed over the years and through the traumas that you've experienced? So that has the idea has fascinated me, and but I also like adventure, so I set his story in the years, between World War I and World War II in Europe during the rise of fascism, which felt relevant to me to the current times. Um, and he has quite a journey of self-discovery and as well as saving the world. So I think it's a lot of fun and as well as thought-provoking. And
Absolutely. Thank you
yeah.
for sharing that. So I wanted to start off with that because your story resonated so much to me that I wanted to see if there was something that you was pulling from the book in regards to why you tied the story to that. I wanted to ask you, so how did you first find out about a genetic mutation? And after hearing that for the first time, what was your reaction like?
Yeah, well, my mother, had had cancer and recovered from it, and then, years later, it came back again, and it looked like it was gonna be terminal at that point, and because of the type of cancer that she had, and because of our family history, they gave her a genetic test for the BRCA mutation, which is a mutation that brings an 87% chance of breast cancer and a 55% chance of ovarian cancer, plus smaller increased risks for melanoma and pancreatic cancer. And she tested positive for the mutation. So that meant that my sisters and I we each had a 50-50 chance of having inherited the same mutation from her. So, of course, my sisters and I got tested right away, and I tested positive for the mutation. And thankfully, my sisters both tested negative. Um, and I think that how I felt at the time was sort of gut punched, as I said in the intro. But ultimately, I think it was if any one of the three of us was to have a positive outcome, I was the best one to have it because I love attention and I got a lot. But it threw me for a real loop because I'd always been a musician and a performer and an entertainer, and I was on stage. I was a cabaret singer, and I was, I'd wear, sexy clothes and high heels, and I had this persona of the being an attractive woman and an attractive performer. And all of a sudden, I was looking at major surgeries. They wanted, within 3 weeks of finding out that I was positive for this genetic mutation, I had a hysterectomy. I mean, everything happened so fast. And then I was already doing research and scheduling to have a double mastectomy, and I'm thinking, well, I'm never gonna go on stage again. I'm never I didn't feel like writing, I didn't feel like singing, I didn't feel like playing. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to go from being my sexy cabaret singer to being, mastectomy girl for the rest of my life. I thought, "Okay, this is it. I'm off the grid now." Um And, I was dealing with, my surgeries and my recoveries, and my mother was getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and we were trying to move her from Atlanta out to Washington where we all live, and, but, having been a musician all my life, that actually came back despite my conviction that I was done. And I was having a difficult time expressing to my husband what it meant to me to lose my breasts, and how, that it changed the way I viewed myself and my identity, and my breasts and my hysterectomy, all my girly bits, were going away, and my identity as a woman.
Right.
So I wrote a song because that's what I do when I'm struggling with something.
Right.
And I wrote a song about how I felt about my change of identity, called Where Are You Now, My Dancing Girl? And I played it for him and I sang it for him. And we both cried. And that was the first moment that he really got it. And it opened up an avenue of communication for us over this very difficult topic. But I wasn't gonna, do anything with it. That was it. I was still done. But then, as I was going through my surgeries, and when you go through surgeries, even if they're major surgeries, there's all kinds of um, crazy stuff that happens, and humorous stuff, silly things, little frustrations, strange coincidences. I started seeing the ridiculousness of all of, trying to deal with insurance and all these things that were going on. And so I ended up writing another song um, about my mastectomy called "Tata Tatas." See, and that's the reaction you're supposed to have.
Oh my God. That's why I like doing this podcast. And I was telling you that every single week that I interview someone, it's always like some amazing story that I hear, man. And just having this interaction, going back and forth, and just learning something new, man, it's amazing. You made my day.
Okay, well, I'm glad about that. Um, anyway, so I wrote that song. It was a humorous song about major surgery because that's how I deal with things.
Right.
And a friend of mine who's sort of a mentor, she's a stage performer and a singer like me who's been on Broadway. And um, she said, "Well, you ought to do a show about this whole thing."
Mhm,
And I said, "Oh, no, 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 never. I'm not gonna do a show." I didn't wanna be mastectomy girl. This would just seal the deal. Um, but then I couldn't get the thought out of my head that I had these 2 songs, and I just started messing around and starting to write out the story when I thought I would never write again.
mhm,
And it just sort of the dam burst, and I just started writing, and in a couple of weeks, I had 9 songs and a 1-hour show about this whole experience of, from learning I had the mutation to recovering from everything and what I had learned and going forward. And it wasn't a downer show. I mean, it had some, um, tragic stuff in it, of course, but it
right,
also had a lot of humor. And the first time I performed this show was for my mother in hospice just a few days before she passed.
oh, wow,
And my family was there, my father and my aunt and uncle and my sisters. And of course, we were all just weeping, you
mhm,
know. But I could, my mother at that point, she was not able to speak or really communicate. But I could see from little reactions in her face that she was following my story and that,
mhm,
and she had smiles for me. And I've done the show a lot of times since then.
mhm.
Um, but there's no performance of it that's gonna be more meaningful than that.
On that one, absolutely.
Um, so that show was called, The Mutant Diaries: Unzipping My Jeans, and I've performed it across the US, and I've done it twice in the UK, and it's streaming on Amazon, actually, if anyone wants to watch it. The Mutant Diaries
I'm
on
gonna check it
Amazon.
out. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So I, I know that there is some humor and there's some seriousness with your story and your experience. And I wanted to ask you, when you were going through your diagnosis and you were telling me that you had to share your story with your husband and you had to share it with him through being creative and creating a song. What was it like now when you're actually going through this day to day and you're going through all the types of treatments and things like that and dealing with all of the doctors, like you said, insurance companies, family and friends, and cognitively you're thinking that your career is over and
Yeah.
you're not going to make it back on stage. What was your mindset like? So what was it, what were you thinking about in regards to all of that? And then who or what was it that you were speaking to, talking to in regards to like comfort, some sort of motivation, some sort of support while you was going through all this?
Well, I don't wanna pretend like I was, some miraculous expert on dealing with trauma.
Mhm.
Um, I cried a lot. I raged. I, stayed in bed, tried to bury it, at
Mhm.
times. But I think, taking steps, helped a lot. There was a lot to do, and I think that having a lot to do was really helpful. I have a bracelet that I made for myself. I don't think I have it right here. I can show it to you. It's got a little emblem on it that I made that says "Just start,"
Mm.
and it's kind of how I deal with things when I feel like I can't do anything. Is that maybe I can do one thing. If I have a stack of bills in my inbox and I can't face looking at them, it's just overwhelming. Well, maybe I can, like, I'll just open one envelope and then I can stop.
Mhm.
Just start, just do one thing, make one phone call, look up one thing you want to learn about. Um, and if you want to stop, stop. I gave myself permission.
Right.
And of course, once you start, I never stopped at just one envelope, because the main resistance is in starting. So that was a huge help, and just having to deal with things, took me out of myself a little bit, and I think, you learn, along the way that, every time you do something and it doesn't end in disaster, you learn that, well, maybe that's gonna be okay, and then if you do something and it does end in disaster, and then the next day you pick up and just start something else, you go, "Okay, well, maybe it's not over." Uh, it's you may have come across this analogy. Imagine that you're walking, you're carrying a cup of coffee,
Mhm.
and someone jostles you, someone bumps into you, and you spill
Right,
your
right.
coffee. Why If someone asks you why you spilled your coffee, what would you say?
If someone asked me if I spilled my coffee, I would say someone hit me, bumped me, or something like that. But I would just, it'd be a simple answer like that. I would not deflect or put blame on anybody else or something like that. So,
Yeah, well, think about it this way. You spilled coffee not because someone jostled you, but because there was coffee in your cup. If you'd had tea in your cup, you would have spilled your tea.
mm,
And if you and I think we're the same way, that life is going to jostle you no matter who you are.
right, right, right,
Something's
right,
going to happen that's going to shake you up. And you know this.
right,
And
right.
what comes out is what's inside. So I think that in small ways, we can be mindful about what we're filling ourselves with. Because when we get jostled, when adversity hits, that's what's going to come out. That's what you're left with, is what you filled yourself with.
Right.
So how do you react to small frustrations in life? Do you laugh them off? Do you harbor resentment? Do you stew about the past and are filled with regret? Um, do you close up, or do you accept the help of others
Mhm.
with an open heart? And I think that you don't really know how resilient you are until you're tested, but I think anyone can prepare themselves for the inevitable adversity that's going to come by practicing being aware of what you're filling yourself with, because that's what you've got. Those are your resources.
Definitely. I love your analogy. I love your explanation. And speaking about resilience and awareness, that's something that we talk about. And the concept that we always mention is breaking the bottle. You mentioned so many emotions that people bottle in and put inside of a bottle and never choose to express it, and they just bottle in, and then the reaction could be so adverse. And I love the fact that you learned how to channel that in regards to getting getting creative. You know what I mean? So, with what you chose to do, can you talk to me about the where did you get like all of the juices, all of the everything just started flowing, said I'm gonna create some songs, I'm gonna create a musical, and then I'm gonna take this on the road, I'm gonna perform this for my mom, I'm gonna take this across the United States. What sparked that for you?
I have no idea. Um, I mean, I've been a creative person from my earliest memory. And, I've always liked, anything I mean, kids like to draw, they like to sing and dance, um, and, I studied, piano when I was a child, and, it music has always moved me, um, so it's not like I specifically planned, like I talked about what you being mindful of what you fill your cup with.
Correct.
I didn't know that this was gonna happen. It came out of complete left field, but, um, it just turned out for me that I had been filling my cup with creativity my whole life, and so that's what I had those were the tools that I had to deal with what was going on in my life. Now people may have different things um, that might help them, that they've been filling their cup with their whole lives. They might have an incredible work ethic, or they may have uh, strong interpersonal relationships that they really connect with other people. There's not one path that's going to lead you to resilience. For me, it was music and humor. I come from a family of, laughter. My mother, always was laughing and finding funny things to read to us. I remember we'd sit around the kitchen table and she'd read stories to us that she could I mean, we couldn't breathe, we were laughing so hard, and she couldn't read. She had to stop reading because she couldn't catch her breath from laughing. So those were my, big influences as a child. I didn't come from a musical family, that was just something that, I don't know where it came from, but I love it.
I love it. I love it as well. As you're telling me that, so growing up, my mom used to tell us like these scary stories that her family used to tell her. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like old fables around Anansi.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, so she used to tell us a lot of stories around that, and used to have us sit around and just laugh all the time. And I just love that when she used to incorporate that with our family. And also, what I thought was pretty cool growing up was that I had a sister that could sing. She could really sing, and
Mhm.
she used to just sing around the house, and I could just see how those songs that she was singing would change the mood and inspire everybody in the house just to think much more positive. I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you, what was your childhood like, and what was it like growing up? And then anything that you may have faced in your childhood that sparked some adversity and things like that, and how did you get past that? But I also wanted to see, what was your childhood like in regards to leading you to the career path, in regards to like being an entertainer and stuff like that.
It's not really an interesting story. I was so lucky growing up, middle class America, and, my parents were encouraging. I was never abused. I mean, I've been so lucky, and I've been lucky. I even consider the BRCA1 genetic mutation to have been a stroke of luck.
Mhm.
Uh, it's turned out to have transformed my life in so many positive ways, and it's my mutant superpower because I figure my mutant superpower. I mean, if you're going to have a mutation, you might as well have a superpower with it, right?
Right, right.
So my mutant superpower because of this was I got to change my future. I got to act before I was struck down by cancer.
Mhm,
And there are so many people who weren't that lucky.
mhm,
They were just blindsided by the disease itself without any chance to head it off. So I consider everything that I went through to be, I consider myself fortunate
mhm.
to have gone through all of that. And uh, I don't regret anything. I never ask why me.
So, for someone that could be in the same shoes that you once walked in, what is some advice or some words of encouragement that you could share with our listeners or someone that has been going through that situation right now?
Well, I've met a lot of people along this journey, who are going through this. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I have performed the show across the US, um, and everywhere that I have. It's frequently been for audiences of people who are going through cancer or have learned that they have a genetic mutation. I performed it at the National Conference of Genetic Counselors, and I've talked about trauma and resilience at cancer international conventions. Um, and it's been very rewarding to talk to people after the show. They come up to me and they share their stories, and
What was that like
it's
for you?
it's so moving when I can see that something that they've been so worried about, that I've been able to, at least if nothing else, be an example of someone who got through it, so that they can see that there's another side, there's an after, there's a possibility of going on. I remember one show, it was in Philadelphia, and after the show, a woman and her husband came up to me and they were both crying.
Wow.
And she said, they told me that her mother had died of cancer 5 years earlier, and this day, at this night, was the first time that she had been able to cry in 5 years, and I guess it was a release for them. They were both so grateful to have made that cross that, um, difficult transition from holding all that grief in to
Right.
finally letting it go, letting it out. So I started crying too, of course, and we hugged, they bought my DVD and um, and it's not always easy, I was fortunate, um, but I've talked to people who are on more difficult paths, they found out too late, and I just do what I can to help them, find, at least reach out and share their stories, um, or at least take their mind off of it for a few minutes. It's like when you take, if you have a headache and you take an aspirin, well, the aspirin maybe your pain goes away. The aspirin didn't really cure your headache.
Right, right.
It just took the pain away while you took your headache while your headache took itself away, while your body healed itself. So, I think of my show or any kind of escape and entertainment as, sort of an aspirin for your soul, that it gives you a respite from the
Mm.
trauma in your life, that you can just forget about it, and for a little while, and it's okay, it'll still be there when you get back. But, it having rest and having a break, gives your body a chance to show how resilient you can be.
How do you maintain a level of balance when it comes to sharing your personal story and like maintaining like some privacy? Because your experience is quite significant. Like we're speaking about breast cancer. We're talking about genetic mutation, and I would like to think that some of these things are some sensitive topics. So you chose to put it all out there and
I did.
share with the world. Did that bother you, or did you like second guess yourself before you even like jumped out there and say I'm going to do this, like maintaining my level of privacy?
That wasn't a problem for me, personally. I decided that I was going to put it all out there, and I especially decided I was gonna put it all out there a year after all of this happened. um, Angelina Jolie was in the news that it turned out she had the same genetic mutation, the
Mhm.
BRCA1 mutation, and she had a double mastectomy. Um, and so it was all over the news, and people were they couldn't believe it. Oh, if she had brain cancer, would she cut her head off? And I mean, just the
Oh
most
my god!
ridiculous thing. So at
Oh
that
my
point,
god!
even though was a year later and I was already doing this show, um, it was a really good opportunity for me to say, "Hey, wait a minute, you know, are you really saying that her breasts are as important as her head?" And people couldn't understand why you would have a preventive amputation. And so it was a great opportunity for me to educate people, and I started a column. I started writing for Huffington Post. I had a column called Ask the Mutant, and I did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. And in my show, I mean, I'm an open book. I'll answer anything. I think I had the areas where I had to be careful where I would possibly tread on other people's privacy, like my
Right,
husband.
right,
Um, and there are parts of my show that do make him a little uncomfortable, but he understands why I need to talk about, how things changed in my relationship with him in terms of intimacy. Um, and I try to be a little delicate about it, but I mean, e- anyone going through an experience like this, you can't shove sexuality under the rug and pretend like it doesn't exist. That was one of the things that other women most wanted to hear about was, is there sex after this, or is there, how did your husband react to all the scars? And um, as I measured them once. I have 65 inches of scars. And if we laid them end to end, they'd be taller than me.
wow, wow.
Um, so no, I'm willing to talk about anything. I just try to be not too graphic in terms of things that would step on someone else's toes. But for me personally, um, it's been the most healing for me to be able to be open and to answer people's questions and tell them things that they need to hear
Got it.
in a frank and open way.
So my follow-up question that I was going to ask you was, if you're okay with sharing, was going through what you've been through, were there any types of setbacks that you did experience when it came to either like your personal relationships with family, your husband, family members, or anything like that? Let's say you wanted to go to the beach, if you want to go to the pool, if you wanted to hang out with a group of girlfriends and things like that, and some of the conversations that they may have. So, what were some setbacks or some things that you encountered or experienced, and what was that like for you? How did you get past it to get through some of those situations?
Boy, it's a tough question. In terms of relationships, um, I've been fortunate. There's things that I've lost that, like physical sensation, body parts that I was quite fond of. And I mean, I've got, new breasts that are really nice looking, but they're completely numb.
Hmm.
And I still miss my breasts. But it's just time, over time I think about it less. I still think about it sometimes, but what can you do? I mean, if something's gone, it's gone. And you find ways to compensate, and you find other things to care about. Um, you throw yourself into other activities. Certainly, my creativity has served to take my mind off of losses. I I took up. I'd been playing piano and singing for most of my life. I took up ukulele, and and now I'm like leading jams and sing-alongs, and I mean, yeah, for all during the entire pandemic, I did two um, twice a week for 3 years, Zoom sing along and play along jam sessions for people who were locked in, and some of whom lost spouses to COVID, and we're just so thankful to have an hour a couple times a week when they didn't have to think about anything but just maybe having some fun and playing some music. So yeah, I guess it's a distraction. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, that's fine. It's fine. Like I said, it was just more so from the standpoint of what you were comfortable with sharing. So as a man, and I'm thinking of what would it be like if my wife was to go through some situation like this? What would that be like for us, and what would those conversations be like? Would they be tough conversations? What would it be like when we're at the doctor and things like that? If my wife was to lose her breast or something like that, and she loves to go to the beach, and what would that be like for us going to the beach? And would she want to turn away from going to the beach anymore? Or when she's
Mhm.
with her girlfriends hanging out, and let's say they're going to the movies, they're hanging out in the park, or they're on a girls trip on a cruise or something like that. Would she want to go on those cruises? She's like, I don't want to go on that cruise because of my situation circumstance. So
Yeah, well,
if you
I mean, from a practical point of view, you should know that it's the law in the U.S. that if your insurance covers a mastectomy, it also covers reconstruction.
okay, okay.
Um, and reconstruction has gotten quite good.
Hmm.
It's not a choice that everyone makes, and that's fine. But if you want breasts, you can have them. Uh, and communication, it's hard to. It was hard at times to talk about with my husband, uh, and for me. putting it into a song made it sort of opened a door to talking about it, but it wasn't easy. It was hard for him to, um he didn't really care about the changes to my body. I mean, we've been together for so long. It that did the and the scars didn't matter to him. What was, I think, hardest for him about seeing my scars was that, in a sense, it made him feel like he had failed as a man to
mm,
protect his family.
mm,
That, here he was, my knight in shining armor, and he wanted to, his damsel was in distress, and he wanted to get on a horse and swing a sword at something, and this was genetics. I mean, it was nothing he could do, so it made him feel just so helpless,
mm,
and as a man, and I don't mean to, be sexist or anything, but I think that there's something, there was certainly a part of him that wanted, that needs very deeply to protect his family.
right.
And this was something he couldn't protect me from, and he couldn't really even help me with, other than being there and providing and, bringing me soup. Um, so that was something that he had to deal with, and of course that affected things for a while. In our communication, trying to uh, get through this together, and deal with it. I had to deal with my stress, and I was also trying to help take care of my mother, and then, and he's just feeling useless, and that was really hard for him.
Thank you for sharing that. Uh, if we could, let's talk a little bit about you being creative. So, what does it take for someone to get super, super creative as you did, saying that I'm going to create a play, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a song? What does it take in regards to like the entire process for you as a creative person, and say, hey, I'm going to start from here. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to take this and put it on stage. I'm going to take this and bring it to conferences. I'm going to take this and bring it to people. I'm going to bring more awareness based off what I've been through to try and help people. Take us through that creative process, that creative space for you in regards for you to accomplish that. Because I think that's a tremendous big feat that you accomplished.
Oh, thank you. Um, I must be crazy. It's all I can. I don't think it wasn't a conscious decision of saying, "Okay, I'm going to therapy myself by writing songs or writing a play." I don't think, you know, writing a book. I mean, good heavens, I spent, 6 or 7 years working on this book. I think that, and it's so hard to get. There's so many books out there. You can buy a perfectly good book for $10. Why would you spend 7 years writing one? Uh, But I think it's because I didn't have a choice. Anyone who had any other choice, I recommend you do something else because it's so much work for so little reward. But I had these stories. I get these ideas in my head, and they really don't give me any rest until I get them out. And uh so, like with Pinocchio, um I had to tell his story. I had to I mean, I can't think of any other reason why I would have spent so many thousands of hours working on this book if I didn't have to. Um, but it helped me to do it. And
Mhm.
but I can't say what's the process by which I came up with the idea. I don't know. People sometimes, they often ask me where my ideas come from. Where did you get an idea to do this or that or the other? And I don't really know. The inside of my I think of the inside let's imagine the inside of your brain is like a Costco, okay? And everything that you've ever experienced and seen that's just on the shelves. You can walk up and down the aisles and you can say, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And, "Oh yeah, this happened." And everything's like you've got the work section, and you've got the relationship section. Well, my Costco has been hit by a tornado,
Mhm.
and all the things are on the floor in no order. And so one thing touches up, don't know what's going to connect with with something else. Something from one aisle could be way over on the other side of the store and connect with something that it has no actual connection with. And that sparks something, the way, well, this bottle of bleach over here breaks and it mixes with that bottle of cleanser from over there, and all of a sudden you've got a toxic gas cloud. So as a creative person, I'm sort of the janitor. I sort of like sweep it all up and go, okay, well, what have we got here? And you never know. You never know.
So, when it comes to the experiences that you've been through and the amount of resilience that you've shown based off all of the emotions that you've dealt with and that you were carrying for so long, what are some lessons or some advice that you could share with some of our listeners right now that are some key takeaways before we get out of here?
I think a lot of it goes back to the analogy I made about the coffee cup, that you can choose now in this moment to be uh, open to positive things in your life. You can choose to um, let go of regret or refocus away from regret, or you can choose to laugh off a frustration rather than get angry for a small frustration. Uh, my sister was telling me the other day that her husband's mother had Alzheimer's,
Hmm.
and she had a habit of reacting to every small frustration with anger and um, just impatience and anger and resentment.
Hmm.
And as the rest of her experience and her mind was stripped away, that's what she was left with. And the end of her life was very sad because she didn't know what was going on, and she was constantly angry and resentful and frustrated and scared. And right now, my own father is fairly well advanced in dementia. And in fact, as soon as we're done with this podcast, I'm going to see him. Um, but he's always been a kind person. He's always been a patient and quiet person.
Hmm.
Um, and even though he's confused and frustrated by the changes that he's at this point still aware of what he's lost, um, he's able to shrug his shoulders and be at peace and enjoy um, what small pleasures remain to him, seeing his daughters, eating a good meal. He still takes, enjoyment because that's what he filled his life with. His when things were good. So I think is be mindful because at some point you're going to get jostled and that coffee cup is going to spill, and you want to have good things spill out.
So, speaking of that, did you ever face any like criticism or skepticism when it came to how you chose to deal with your situations through humor. Through humor, did anyone ever like jostle you? Did anyone say, "Hey, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? You shouldn't be doing this," or telling jokes or being creative the way you are about it while you was going through your situation?
Um, Not directly to my face.
Hmm.
I worried about it sometimes that, you know, I didn't want people to think that I was making light of something that was serious. And I'm sure that there were people who felt that way, that I was making jokes about something that was serious. But I mean, you talk to doctors and nurses, that's the survival thing. You have to be able to find humor or you're just going to spiral into despair. Um, I worried that people would think I was being self-indulgent and, thinking that, "Oh, I had it so terrible," when there's people who had it much worse. In fact, I have heard those criticisms from people.
Hmm.
Um, you know, one person who, had, v with a stage 0 breast cancer and had a lumpectomy, no chemo, and a week of radiation, which I don't discount the trauma of that because it really, messes with your mind and a lot of things. But she dismissed what I went through as, "Oh, it's like a flu shot," that she says, "Oh, it was like you had yours was you didn't, you just had preventive mastectomy and hysterectomy. That's like getting a flu shot."
Wow.
So it felt really there's a certain element of competitiveness about trauma, I think, and you've probably, dealt with this in your, practice of
Hmm.
people saying, either saying, "Well, I had it worse," or feeling like, "Oh, I don't deserve to feel bad because someone else has it worse."
Right.
And it's you just have to decide that it's not a competition,
True.
and you just have to do the best you can. So, I'm sure there's people out there who think I was self-indulgent or wanting attention for my flu shot, but, I also know from my experience that I've helped a lot of people.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit of when it comes to how do you go about self care for yourself nowadays? Aside from or if that's what it is, aside from humor, but how do you go about self care for Eva?
The big thing it's still music. Um, a after I took up, the ukulele, um, I discovered that there's these groups of people all around the country who they're not musicians, they're not professionals. They just get together, every week and play whatever songs they wanna play for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. And they have a lot of fun, and I joined one of these groups to learn, to practice playing, and I discovered this whole world of people who just make music for the fun of it, and I think we've gotten into this mindset, and I hear this all the time, that music is something that you listen to, it's not something that you make unless you're, good enough to be on America's Got Talent, or, it's the realm of professionals. But it's something that's so innate. I think humans had music before they had language. Is what, enabled early humans to survive. It was depending on each other and bonding with each other in groups. And any
So much power in
activity,
music. It's crazy.
when you're doing a rhythmic activity together with other people, you feel a connection with them. I have felt this many times. You fall in love a little bit with the people that you're sharing this activity, this rhythmic activity with, and I think it's in our genes to respond to rhythm. in that way. And I was so, sad that most people that I came into contact with weren't having this experience. So I went to my city council here in Redmond and I said we should have a monthly sing along for everyone, and they said that sounds great, and they gave me a room and some publicity, and I showed up there with my ukulele, and I got over 100 people came to the first one.
Oh my
So there
God.
was a hunger for connection, and this was just before the pandemic. There was this hunger and this need and to gather and do something that was bonding and fun. And I think that that has been self-care for myself to run these sessions and for the people who come to feel a connection with their community. If you don't have connections with the people who are around you, um, you're lost.
Right.
And so that's been so rewarding to be able to create that community for myself and for people around me. And we're still doing it. And we did it, on Zoom for a few years, but now we're back to doing it with each other. And so making music, and people come up to me all the time and say, "Oh, well, you don't want me. I can't sing." I said, "No, no, no. I especially want you." Because it's not about how well you sing or how well you play. No one cares. If there's 100 people singing, they're not gonna hear you. You're not gonna be asked to do a
Right.
solo. And it brings you in even though I've been a musician my whole life, um, I've always been, like when you're rehearsing or practicing, you're thinking about what you're gonna be using that music for, and when you're performing, there's an element of you that's in the moment of the music, but there's also a split mind where you're thinking about the audience, or you're thinking about the performance, or you're thinking about the next song. And when in these sing-alongs where there's no stakes, you can just be in that moment. You can just be right now, right here, making this sound with people all around you who are doing the same thing. And it's a completely different experience. And I want everyone to have that experience.
Wow. So, how has your perspective on life and personal growth evolved since your initial diagnosis and now living this fabulous life that you're living now?
Oh, uh, I feel so fortunate. I have a good life. I have surrounded myself with people I love. Um, and I wouldn't take back any of it. Um, I'm not sure how to even answer your question. I just, wake up in the morning and there's a garden that needs something, and there's food that needs cooking, and there's friends that need reaching out to, and there's
Mhm.
um this time of year anyway, we've got a little sunshine, which is nice. Um, I'm older now. My husband and I are well, he's retired. Um, and I would be retired if I wasn't writing books, doing all this stuff. But um, it's just I just try to be in each day as much as I can, and I don't think excessively about the future or the past.
Hmm. Wow. So, what are some future goals and aspirations in terms of the creative work that you're doing and just being an advocate? I think you're a strong advocate based off sharing your message, empowering women. So, what are some future goals that you have in plans, or what are you thinking about doing for the future?
Music is always a part of it. Now that we're coming out of the pandemic, there's more performance opportunities. I play in a band. Uh, I have another book that I'm just starting to write. Um, I want to travel and see more places. A lot of it is around creating community around communal music. And that I want to do more of that and create more opportunities for people to gather and have that experience. Um, I think in some ways my goals are getting a little more close to home.
Mhm.
Um, but I still want people to buy my book, Pinocchio's Guide to the End of the World. And I'm looking forward to I've got, some book clubs that are starting to pick it up, and, I'm, zooming into their sessions when they talk about the book and love to talk to people, uh, about that. Uh, and, I don't know, just, try to enjoy as much I love hiking, getting outdoors, I love being healthy and, it's certainly after, having a brush with your mortality, and feeling like, you were close to death at some point, you start to go, "Okay, I wanna be here for my life,
Right.
for as much of it as I have, because I mean, you always know you're gonna die. Everyone knows that after a certain age, but you know it more viscerally after you've had a deep trauma,
Yeah.
and and I'm okay with that. Yeah, I decided I'm okay with that. That the cancer could come back anyway. I could, get hit by a truck or whatever. But um, I want, whenever that day comes, to feel like I got, I gave and I got as much as I was capable of giving and receiving, and it'll be okay. The world will go on.
Mhm. Eva, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this evening, to learn so much about your story, for you to be so, so, so transparent, be so super authentic, and give your perspective on what was your experience like interacting with people, interacting with your family. And then you said, you know what, I'm going to share this experience with the world because I know that there's so many people that's dealing with this experience that I've been through. I just want to tell you
Mhm.
thank you so much for coming on here. I truly, truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's been a delight to meet you, and I wish you great success.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, if anybody wanted to work with you, if anybody wanted to book you on another podcast, if anybody wanted to have you come and speak at the conference, if anybody wanted to buy one of your books, if anybody wanted to have you as a keynote speaker or something like that, how can they get
Mhm.
in contact with you and work with you?
I have a website. It's evamoon.net, EVAMOON.net. There it is. And yeah, everything's there. You can contact me through my website and you can find out about my shows and my music and my books and my plays and on all of that. There's videos and links there. And I'm happy to talk one on one too with people who are going through traumas. And I've done, a fair amount of that too. So just, yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eva, for being a guest this week on the Overcoming Adversity podcast. Until next time, guys, we love you. Peace.
Thanks, Mike.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, know it come and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.